this was a reminder that, oh, the horizon is getting closer, and uh, there are more potentials for that. So, but I don't think it makes me. I don't think I appreciate life any less than I did before this diagnosis. I consider myself very fortunate. I tend. I used to say blessed, but I don't like saying that because the flip side of that is that people who don't do as well or don't have the same outcomes aren't blessed. So I just will say I'm very fortunate. Hi, I'm Al Roker, a co host of The Today Show and the owner of Al Roker Entertainment, an author and just a guy who likes hanging around. And you're watching Behind the Brand with Brian Elliott.
Hey everyone, I'm Brian Elliott. Welcome to another edition of Behind the Brand. Al, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
I usually ask my guest, how did you get this job?
I'm not even sure where I start because I got the Today Show kind of because I was already working on the weekend Today Show. And I got that job because I was filling in for Willard Scott because I was in proximity to Willard Scott because I was doing the weather on WNBC News 4 New York. So, I kind of backed into doing the Today Show, mostly because I was close by and I could wear Willard's pants.
Yeah, so it kind of reminds me of like a Tom Brady story, right? Like he backed up Drew Bledsoe, a great quarterback. Then something happened with Bledsoe. He got injured. He was out, whatever. And then Brady slips in. So you're Brady in this story.
Yeah, and actually, that's been kind of my career. I mean, before that, when I was at WNBC, I was the weekend weather person. The weekday weather person was Frank Field, who was a legend. And 6 months after I got to New York, he got into a contract dispute with NBC and left and went to go to WCBS. So, they kind of like had nobody else to put in. So I was like, all right, new guy, you're it, which was a little intimidating because you never want to follow a legend. You want to follow the guy who follows the legend, because that guy usually gets fired. But it worked out okay. And even before that, my first job in television, I was I was a weekend weather guy at the CBS station in Syracuse. I was in college, and the weekday weather guy had a little slip of the tongue. And you got to remember this was 1974, so 1976. I'm sorry. So they let him go, and again, I mean, literally that evening they let him go after the 6 o'clock news. I had to go back to school, get my suit, and come back down and do the 11 o'clock news. So I have been the recipient or the beneficiary of others' misfortunes.
Well, and I want to unpack that a little bit more because to me, sure, I receive that story at face value, but I also start to look into it a little bit, which is this idea of proximity. In other words, like being in the right place at the right time, and also kind of reminds me of that, that luck definition, right? When opportunity meets timing or whatever that is, hard work meets opportunity or hard work meets timing. You did the work. You were prepared to step into the spotlight when you were called on. You were standing on the sidelines, if we're going to carry out the sports metaphor, and then the coach called your number, the other player got called out, and you got called in, and you were ready to roll. And then you started dropping dimes. So
yeah, and but you're also sometimes the beneficiary to continue that metaphor. Perhaps the elder quarterback takes you under his wing, is confident enough that he knows when it's time, and he passes the ball to you. That was my case in Willard's. In the Willard situation, Willard was the Today Show weather person, beloved, literally like a second dad to me. And he was the one who said, "You know what? I think it's time to step back." And I'm telling them they're crazy if they don't tap you. And I was fortunate they did, but I was the beneficiary of his largesse. of saying, you know what, it's time for me to semi-retire. And so, as far as I'm concerned, he's weathercaster emeritus at the Today Show.
I always like to ask about early influences. Did you always want to be on TV? Did you always want to be in
No,
weather?
no.
What were your early aspirations? Young kid, think
My,
about what he wants.
I've got a book out that's called "You Look So Much Better in Person: True Stories of Absurdity and Success," and I had no, I mean zero, Brian, interest in being on TV. I wanted to be in television. I wanted to work in TV. Uh, Even when I was like 6 or 7, my mother said I once described television shows that shows that were on film, filmed dramas, things like that, were wet shows, and shows that were live were dry shows. They looked, because the videotape looked live. And so I never wanted to be on TV. I just was, although it's funny, my mother's mother, my grandmother, who my middle girl is named after, Leela, she used to call me a chatterbox. And she'd go, "Oh, this one's a chatterbox, Isabel. He's going to be on television." And of course, everybody looked at her like grandma's in the cooking sherry again, because little Al was chunky and thick Coke bottle glasses. But so I like I said, I had no interest in being on television. I went to SUNY Oswego, which my department chairman put me up for a weekend weather job at WHEN in Syracuse, New York. Now, mind you, this is the same guy who told me after my first production class, television performance class, that I had the perfect face for radio. But he put me up for it. Now, there was another guy in that same class, and he left after sophomore year, and I don't know what became of him. A guy named Jerry Seinfeld. And never heard of the guy, but so, there was a guy who you knew was destined for greatness. Me, not so much. So, but my department chairman thought enough, knew something I didn't, and that's one of the things I've been very fortunate. I if somebody else thinks I can do something, even if, and I think I tell younger people that even if you don't think you can do it, somebody else, because you're too close to it, you're you, but somebody a couple of steps away from you can probably see a little bit better what your potential is.
Yeah, it's a vantage point thing, right?
Yep.
So, did your parents want to steer you into something more traditional? Like, did they say, "Al, you should go into law or be an accountant"?
No,
Or
no, no, no. Look. I was the first kid. I was the first of my family to go to college, and they were, look, there were 6 of us, 6 kids. They were just happy to get an empty bed just to get me out of the house. Um, I wanted more than anything. I'm an amateur cartoonist, and I wanted to go to the New York School of Graphic Art and Design, because that's where almost every, golden age comic artist and cartoonist went. And to them, no, you're not going to school to learn how to draw comics. That no, no, no. Yeah. And I got a scholarship to a Jesuit military school in Manhattan called Xavier High School. And that, okay, because the Jesuits, it's a good education. So let's go with that. And that's one of those things that's always stuck with me, because my daughter Leela, went to private schools in Manhattan through middle school, and she decided she wanted to go to the LaGuardia School of Performing Arts, the famed school. And my wife was just dead set against it. She went, look, she grew up in the South. She went to segregated schools till like fifth grade. Here, her daughter has this great opportunity. And my feeling was, you know what? I always look, and I get it. Everything turned out really nicely for me. I'm not complaining. But I always wonder what would have happened if I had gone to that school, if I had gone to the New York School of Graphic Art and Design. And so I didn't want my daughter to have that what if. And the interesting thing is, she went, and I think she's a terrific musical theater person. And her head of the theater department said she's a really good director. But she said, "You know what, Dad? I'm good. I don't think I'm that good." And but she got it out of her system, and now she's about to graduate with a journalism degree at the American University of Paris. But
Not bad.
yeah, she's doing okay.
Well, so let's go
Uh,
back. Let's go back just for people who have kids who are parenting. Let's talk about some parenting advice because you've got a little bit of
sure.
experience. I have a little bit of
Yeah.
experience. We can share ideas. But so, why didn't your wife want her to go to the performing arts school? I mean, I have an idea. I'm sort of reading through the lines, but you kind of said she went to a segregated school. Were you worried about privilege or just kind of spoiling her, or what?
No, 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 not at all. I think for Deborah, it was, she's going to get this great world class education at this school, this private school she's going to. But my feeling was it was not about spoiling her, although a wonderful byproduct of that was that she has a set of friends that she still has that she would have never had she gone to what was a predominantly white school. The idea of this school's diversity up until recently was, a kid, one of the kids was a brunette, and their, their dad wasn't in finance or medicine, so, and I think it served her well. I think because she had a diversity of friends from a geographical standpoint, a socioeconomic standpoint, a racial standpoint. Uh, it
Yeah,
made
yeah. I would think a school like that pulls from the world.
it does. It does. And my wife was also concerned that, oh well, it's not one of those really like private Ivy Leagues that feed into the Ivy Leagues. And in talking to college admissions folks, that said, we love kids like this who come from these schools because they're interesting. They're different. We can pick for days the kids from the you name it, the brand name private schools in either L.A. or New York or Boston. But it's these other kids who are interesting, and I think that's what people need to look at. What sets your kid apart? Because I mean, look, like I said, I went to Oswego State. And I've done okay, and even today, I think look, 80% of the kids don't go to those 10-20% of the upper level schools, and a lot of these kids do really well, and in fact I might argue probably do better.
I think I can think of a book written by Angela Duckworth called Grit. It's a book that she wrote. I think she's at I don't know if she's at Penn State or Wharton. It's one of those schools in the Pennsylvania area.
Mhm.
And she wrote this book called Grit, which really talks about it has nothing to do with your DNA. It has nothing to do with your parents, your bank account. Grit is something that you have to develop, and it comes from basically pushing through hard things.
Yeah.
And so I agree. I have my fair share of privilege, but I was also just like everyone else, struggled with their share of adversity and challenges. You have this love of drawing, and so how do we make the connection from that to to the Weatherman?
Well, like I said, I ended up going to SUNY Oswego. My department chairman puts me up for a weekend weather job. Now, his motto was take whatever job you can get to get your foot in the door, and you'll go on from there. You probably wanted, especially back then, you wanted to go to Syracuse University or NYU or USC or UCLA. But I went to SUNY Oswego. But what was one of the benefits of that was because it was a scrappy state school, you got a lot more hands-on experience and smaller classes and professors who knew you, so that I don't think, and I can honestly say this, I think if I had gone to SUNY, if I had gone to Syracuse or NYU or USC or UCLA, I wouldn't be doing this. I wouldn't be where I am today, because again, I had a department chairman who knew who I was, knew what my potential was, gave me the opportunity. Plus, I had the opportunity to do a lot of stuff within the school, both while I was working and while I was a student, that I think put me head and shoulders above, my compadres who were going to these brand name schools. And by the way, probably paying 5 times as much a year.
Yeah, yeah. You've been at the Today Show. It seems like from the get, you've seen a lot. Like you've seen a lot of people come and go over the years. Talk about maybe, or talk to some of these aspiring people that want to get into the business. Give them some advice about entertainment, about TV, maybe something that they don't know.
What is television now has changed so much. I mean, people are watching. For my definition, if it has a screen, whether glass or polymer or whatever, it's TV. It's television, and that's one of those things that I don't think changes. I think people watch television for people, for stories.
Yeah.
Now it's called content. Yeah, but it's the same thing that it was in the 50s. It was there were stories, there were people that you found interesting, whether they were fictional or real. Like in the news business, look, we're all for the most part telling the same stories, the same news stories.
Right.
So what changes that? What's the differentiator? It's the people who tell the stories and how they're told. So I think I don't care whether you're working on TikTok or Zoom or what is it now, Clubhouse. That's all audio. I mean, it's basically radio. Podcasts are radio, or radio with pictures, which is television, which is this. It's all the same. So, what makes you different? Why should somebody want to listen/watch you? And I think one of the things Willard gave me two of the best bits of advice, both personally and professionally. First one was never give up your day job. Okay, so I do the Today Show, but I also have a production company, Roker Entertainment. We do all kinds of shows, reality, scripted. We've got an animated series coming out, different things. But I still do the Today Show because that is the font from which other things spring. People know me from the Today Show, and my own dad was the perfect example of that. He was a bus driver, but he also at the depot in his off time ran a sandwich shop and did odd jobs. Yeah, before the side hustle, before you heard, back in the day, everybody had a side hustle, but it was a second or third job. You didn't call it the side hustle. And the other bit of advice Willard gave me, and this goes to this advice for young people, is always be yourself. You can create a character, but eventually people will see through that. If you're not who you are, authentically, as people say, or organically, it just becomes too difficult. It's so much easier just to be you.
Yeah, it's an Oscar Wilde quote, right? Be yourself because everyone else is taken. I love that quote. I love that idea. That's really smart advice. Can I ask you? We don't have to get technical with numbers and revenue and all that.
Right.
But can you just tell me, like, is the Today Show then sort of like your loss leader? In other words, in terms of percentage-wise, if you look at your earning potential, is the Today Show 25%, 50%, 75%, and your production company is a quarter of that, or what's the mix?
I don't get into percentages. I mean, look, I obviously, make a good living from the Today Show, so I'm not going to, be disingenuous about that. But our production company, has a good income as well. But it's a different kind of thing, as you know, with your own companies. There are other expenses, whereas with the Today Show, that's me.
Well, and the reason I ask it with context, because I think there are a lot of people doing multiple things right now, but you can't clone yourself, right? Like so, in my business, I really relate with what you're saying because I write and do these things for Inc. magazine and Fast Company. It gives great exposure, and yet I have this production company where I'm doing a lot of film and commercial stuff as well, films. I really wish I could clone myself, but I can't. And so my production company is 95% of my revenue, and this editorial is 5%. but it takes 50% of my time. So it's
Yeah.
disproportionate, right? Like, so how do you balance that with your production company?
Well, the good news is I've got really good people working with me. So, which allows me to, say, concentrate on my Today Show stuff, which is, I mean, by the very nature of it, I mean, I get up at, 3:45, 4 o'clock. I do the Today Show through the 10 o'clock hour. Sometimes we have to update things like that. Now, pre-pandemic, you'd go into the office after the show and you'd kibitz, you'd talk, you'd work on stuff. Now, again, everything's, I mean, our offices are open, but almost nobody's in there. I'm able to concentrate on those things that I do, and then I'm still looking for stories and folks to interview for the Today Show, when I'm not working. But it's interesting. Deborah and I, my wife and I, are reading this book, "How Not to Work," and 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 the title is a little misleading in that what is work? You know, uh, by its definition, what is work? And some of the things you don't think are work are, and some of the things that you think aren't. And so, I think what's interesting now is with us being able to do this from our homes. I don't know who it is who said it, but somebody said, we're not working from home, we're living at work. So, you know, and so and our kids are doing the same thing if they're hybrid or virtual going to school. So it's all melded together. But I find that, like with the production company, it is interesting in that this job on the Today Show is, somebody said, it must be your dream job. Well, I never dreamed of being on the Today Show, so not really. But I always wanted to do TV production, and so I get to live that dream through the production company. So each one feeds a different need, if you will, or desire.
I gotcha. So on this show, we talk a lot about brands. We talk about brand case studies. We talk about the people behind the brands. Um, what is the Al Roker brand?
I'm one of those people, and I'm an old guy. Okay, I'm older than you, Brian. And the idea that when somebody said, "What's your brand?" It almost, it sounds too calculating, like you created this. And I think things, look, if you're a brand, like if you're Slim Jim or you're Jimmy Dean or Peter Pan or whatever, that's a brand. Uh, I don't like to think of myself as a commodity, and
Sure.
so and I hear exactly what you're saying, and I get it. I just, whoever I am, or whatever people think of me when you say Al Roker, is the product of so many different things, starting off with Al and Isabel Roker, and my siblings, and the people who raised me. And when I say raised me, I mean from St. Catherine of Siena, the nuns and the lay teachers, I, so to my kids, to my wife, to all those people who, I've touched and have touched me. Um, that's so I really don't know how to answer that. But when somebody says, I said, "What, my brand? What are you talking about?" And I know, I mean, I get it, I really do, but I'm loath to define it.
That's fair. Um, I think and I've been given that same kind of answer before, actually from my mentor, who Seth Godin is my mentor. He's a best-selling author, and he told me straight up. He said, "Brian, I am not a brand. I'm a human being." And I said, "Okay, Seth, that's fair, but I believe that we all have a brand." But backing up a little bit, defining what a brand is. A brand is not our product or service. So, we are not commodities, and our brand is also not the commodity, service, or product that we make. the brand is not a function or result of advertising. So it's not like, an awareness factor. Although, advertising and publicity can really help promote your brand and build awareness. But that's not what a brand is. Um, a brand really is what other people think about you. And so a brand really lives in the hearts and minds of other people as they come into contact with you. So I think actually you're right on track with what I believe, which is we are a sum total of all the experiences that we have, and a sum total of our brand is a sum total of everyone that we come in contact with. So if you pass me in the street and I was rude, I might you might think of me as rude, or
Sure.
charismatic, or funny, or intelligent. So I think if we are in control of that narrative, the best thing that we can do is sort of live our true self. Back to your original
Hmm.
advice, which is just be yourself, because then you will be true to your brand. You'll be the kind of person that you are trying to portray, and you'll be in alignment with what other people think and feel about you, because you will sort of
Hmm.
walk the talk. Um,
I just interviewed Eddie Murphy for the new Coming to America. And I asked him, it was, I think, the last question I asked him. I said, uh, so Eddie, Coming to America, Beverly Hills Cop, what's what film is your legacy? Do you want it to be your legacy? He goes, oh, I don't think any of these films is my legacy. He goes, my legacy are those 10 children I've got. That's my legacy. As they go, that's how people will think of me, and I almost felt ashamed that I asked him that question. I thought, wow, that's that's the perfect answer. And look, it's funny because I remember thinking my parents, what did they want? They wanted their children to just, and I don't think what they would determine what a success would be. They just, or for us, what success would be. They just wanted us to do well. And if your kids are happy and satisfied and making a living and are good human beings, boy, I mean, that's your brand, if you will. Now, and that's not to say that if you don't have children or something happens with your kids but I think if you ask any parent, that's a pretty good deal.
we are not our work, right? It doesn't necessarily always define us. Sometimes we do one for the money and one for the show. We do our amazing documentary film, and then we may do a buddy comedy
Mhm.
to get some money so we can do the amazingly important documentary film. But let's go back uh, to talent. You've talked to a lot of amazing, interesting people. Who have you been most starstruck by?
Being an amateur cartoonist, uh, I have always been, I'd always been a Peanuts fan. I got an opportunity for the 50th anniversary of Peanuts to interview Charles Schultz, and I was so incredibly nervous because this guy is, it's Charles Schultz, it's the creator of Charlie Brown, and he could not have been nicer. He look, this is not to say that he didn't have an ego, but he was a pretty humble man. He's a philosophical man. He was a pleasant man. He was very comfortable with who he was. When you think about, okay, you want to talk about a brand, and I'm sure it's the same today, if not even more valuable. Snoopy, just Snoopy merchandise was worth $1 billion a year. Just Snoopy.
Yeah,
I mean, that's
that's what I thought about when you said George Schultz. I didn't think about Charlie Brown or Linus or Lucy, all those iconic characters. I thought right of Snoopy.
Yeah, but here he was. He didn't live in an ostentatious house. Uh, did good work with his money, charity work and such. His wife Jeannie is a terrific human being, and so I got to talk to him, and it was like, wow, that's uh, that's really amazing. And then 6 months later, it's announced that he has stage 4 colon cancer. And about a week after that, I we get a call asking for me to come back out and do one more interview with him. And I mean, it was like devastating. But again, the grace was there, the humor. You know, a man who was not afraid to show emotion. He cried some, um, but those two interviews. I would say probably were the ones that affected me the most.
I appreciate you sharing that. And I also wanted to ask you, you had your health scare this year, or this last year, and you were very vocal about it. You went public and you very openly talked about that. Can you talk about that experience a little bit and what you learned from it?
Yeah, I like a lot of people. Listen, I've had a number of joint surgeries. Yeah, to be perfectly honest, I had a bad car accident in 1986. Pretty much same sort of injuries that Tiger Woods has. Only I only had it in one leg. He's had it in two legs, ankles. So I mean, I've had knee surgeries, I've had a hip replacement, I've had gastric bypass, and I've always been fairly open about it because I think it's a teachable moment. I think if you can help other people get through something. Yeah, and I just had my right shoulder replaced in August, and I had. During the pandemic, had not gone to the doctor, and finally, it was like, okay, there was a window. It was time to I could get a physical. Let me go in, get the physical. And my doctor said, "Look, unfortunately, your PSA numbers are really up. Um, yeah, so let's do an MR and let's do an MRI. See if we see anything. Do the MRI? No, nothing on the MRI. No targets. He goes, but this number is just really high. I think we should do a biopsy. Get a urological surgeon does the biopsy. They find a very aggressive cancer, prostate cancer. And it's funny because we'd had the biopsy, and they just scheduled a follow up appointment. And that morning of the appointment, my wife Deborah said, "You want me to go with you?" I said, "Oh, please, it's just a follow up. What's that?" I get there, I'm waiting in the doctor's office. He comes in, and the first thing he says is, I always like to have these conversations." As he's closing the door, "I always like to have this conversation face to face." I'm like, "Wait, what? What?" He goes, "So, and he sits down behind his desk, and he goes, you have prostate cancer." And it's like, wait, 5 minutes before he walked in, I felt fine. And 5 minutes later, oh, you've got cancer. And I didn't feel any different physically. But you hear those words and you mentally. Well, the thing that was most devastating, and this is honest, God's honest truth, I thought, oh no, I didn't Deborah's not here. She is going to be so ticked off, because A, she's going to think you should not be alone to get this news, and B, what is the doctor going to think of me? I'm not there with you. Um,
My wife and I have this conversation all the time. She says, "If you die on me, I'm going to kill you. Like,
yeah,
don't you dare
yeah.
die early." Yeah, I get it.
So it was tough, and things moved by pretty quickly. There's a book by Malcolm Gladwell, one of the most influential books in my life that I read, called Blink.
Read it.
Uh,
Yeah, great book.
yeah, and so the concept is basically your gut reaction is usually the right one. And my gut reaction was surgery. I just want to get this thing out. And a lot of people made cases for radiation, and there's focal something, radiation and all that. And my thing was, you know what? Let's just get it out. And so and a number of people said you could go either way, but a few doctors that I trust said you're making the right choice. And so I did the surgery. Fortunately, uh, when they took the prostate out, and they took some lymph nodes out around it, they were doing pathology as the surgery was going on, and everything looked clear. Of course, you don't really know until about 4 months afterwards. You do an initial PSA test, And if it's for Sloan Kettering, where I went, if it's below 0.05, they consider you undetectable. And that's what happened in January. So every 6 months from now on, for the next 5 years, I get a blood test. And I wanted to go public with it because a lot of guys don't, you know, we're wussies when it comes to our own health. We tend to ignore it, assume it'll go away or something like that. And in the case of prostate cancer, black men are 2 times as likely to develop it and 50% more likely to die from it.
Yeah.
So I thought, let's make this something we can use to help people.
Has it changed your outlook on life at all? Like, I mean, it seems like you're a very upbeat, positive guy, but did it change you at all?
I don't think so. Other than it did. Look, I've had, like I said, a couple of bad car accidents, both of which were not my fault. But I came very close. But when you're younger, you feel somewhat invincible. This was a reminder that, the horizon is getting closer. And there are more potentials for that. So, but I don't think it makes me. I don't think I appreciate life any less than I did before this diagnosis. I consider myself very fortunate. I tend. I used to say blessed, but I don't like saying that because the flip side of that is that people who don't do as well or don't have the same outcomes aren't blessed. So I just will say I'm very fortunate.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I'm glad you made that distinction because good things happen to bad people and bad things happen to good people all the time. And it has nothing to do with blessings per se, right? Sometimes it's just what's happening. You wrote this book and it's sort of a memoir, right? But why did you write it and who did you write it for?
It was the things that I've learned over 45 years of working in this business.
Yeah.
And that I think are applicable for most folks.
Pick one or two from the book that you want to share that you think would have impact.
The last chapter of the book is Get Yourself an A-Team. One of my all-time favorite shows is the A-Team.
Oh yeah. Good show.
It's just goofy but it was one of the best action TV series.
Yeah, I love it when a plan comes together, right?
And there you go. Hannibal Smith. In 1972, a crack commando unit was sent to prison by a military court for a crime they didn't commit. These men promptly escaped from a maximum security stockade to the Los Angeles underground. Today, still wanted by the government, they survive as soldiers of fortune. If you have a problem, if no one else can help, and if you can find them, maybe you can hire the A-Team. It's one of the greatest openings of all time. But
For
in
sure.
any event, the idea is we don't do anything by ourselves. That if you want to be successful, you need to assemble yourself an A-Team. Whether it's personally or professionally. Look, Hannibal Smith was great at logistics. The Face could scam anybody out of anything. Howling Man Murdoch could fly any aircraft, and Mr. T could build anything out of a garage full of junk. An attack vehicle that would, of course, save the day. So you've got to find those folks in your life that help you achieve your goals. And because no one person can be that Swiss Army knife. You need other people and other skills to help you achieve your goals, whether personally or professionally.
I love that advice. Parting words for entrepreneurs, maybe final bit of advice?
People are afraid of the word no. I'm a big believer in yes, but if you say yes to everything, you don't have the bandwidth or the capability to really focus in on the things that you want to. So while I think yes is an important word, I think no is just as important.
I mean, we were just sitting back, chopping it up, reminiscing about the good old days and all that. Tracking my roots, where I came from and where I'm going. But like I say, man, always said it. It's not about the destination. Nope. It's all about the journey.